Spring-heeled Jack terrorized London in the 1800s, a man that would viciously attack people and then bound away into the night. Even when pursued, he would effortlessly escape, leaping over fences and over rooftops, never to be caught. In the beginning, he was known as nothing more than a prankster with a taste for violence, but as time progressed, accusations of murder began, and even the theory of him being a serial killer. This is a big difference, going from prankster to serial killer. Quite a journey. Let's consider how this came about. It all started in the early 1800s, when the various sightings and attacks began. Spring-heeled Jack was described as being a tall, thin man with red eyes like fireballs, who wore a black cloak and a helmet over his tight-fitting clothes, and he was said to have cold, clammy claw-like hands that he would rip and wound his victims with. He earned his name by how he would escape, by superhuman leaps, jumping high walls, or even houses, the whole while laughing like a maniac and spitting blue flames, never to be caught, always left to terrorize London for another day. One of his earliest victims was Mary Stevens, a simple servant girl who was walking home at night alone through Clapham Common. Little did she know that she was walking straight towards a monster. Jack was lying in wait in the darkness and sprung upon her, grabbing her tightly, ripping at her clothes, and trying desperately to kiss her. This seems far from being a prankster. An attempted rape would describe it better. She was able to fight herself free and to scream for help, yet no one could find him. He simply disappeared. That is, until the next day, when a man fitting his description was spotted near her house. But a passing carriage caused him to flee, leaping over a 9-foot wall, which in turn startled the carriage driver, causing him to crash. Another victim was Jane Alsop, who answered the door to a man wearing a cloak who claimed to be a policeman, asking for a candle. When she returned with one, he threw open his cloak and revealed his hideous appearance and began assaulting her, tearing her clothes off with claws she claimed were like metal, ripping at her neck and arms, only to flee when others in the house came to her aid. Or consider Lucy Scales, the daughter of a butcher, who was walking through an alley when she encountered Jack. He leapt upon her in this instance and spat blue flames into her face, causing her to be seized with violent fits of hysteria that lasted for hours. These assaults continued, but weren't strictly limited to women. On one occasion, a sentry on duty at Aldershot's barracks was approached by a strange figure in the darkness. Once he was close enough, he began slapping the sentry about the face, until the guard fired at Jack, who fled into the darkness, escaping by taking long leaps that were not humanly possible. By this point, London was in an uproar. People were afraid to go out into the night for fear of being accosted by Spring-heeled Jack. Special patrols were organized to roam the streets in search of him. Even the Duke of Wellington, a 70-year-old war veteran, got involved. He patrolled the streets on horseback, armed with his pistols, eager to hunt down this scourge. And this almost worked, because in 1877, Spring-heeled Jack appeared at the Newport Arch in Lincoln, and he was chased by a mob who shot at him with no effect. He simply leapt from rooftop to rooftop, laughing like a maniac until he disappeared into the night. Now, there are many theories about Jack. One is that he couldn't have been simply one man. The attacks took place over a 60-year period, far longer than any one man could physically pull them off. Some think it was a group of men, possibly aristocrats, who got their kicks from assaulting the ordinary people of London. Some say that it was the case of Jack's fame and notoriety spawning copycats. And what about his amazing ability to leap uncanny distances? One theory is that he had some gadget that allowed him to jump these unusually high distances, thus his name, Spring-heeled Jack. Another theory is that maybe this was some early form of parkour, which to the people of that time would have seemed like magic, as he would disappear over buildings with little effort, scaling walls and rooftops in split seconds, leaving pursuers pathetically behind. Some speculate that Jack, who would often attack people at night near pubs, was simply some attempt by a misguided do-gooder trying to prevent or discourage peasants from drinking too much, or living a life of debauchery, and so, thus, the legend of this fiend prowling the night was spawned to terrify them into staying home. But if this was the case, he soon crossed the line. Accusations soon surfaced accusing him of murder. He was accused of causing the demise of multiple people by causing them to be frightened to death. In one case, he was attributed with the death of a 13-year-old sex worker named Maria Davis, who was pushed from a bridge into an open sewer called Folly's Ditch. At this time in the late 1880s, Jack the Ripper began committing the Whitechapel murders. It's interesting to note how Spring-Heeled Jack immediately became associated with these murders. In fact, the murderer, or someone pretending to be him, even began using his name. One of the earliest letters sent to the police, supposedly from the Ripper himself, was signed Spring-Heeled Jack, the Whitechapel murderer. Soon the anonymous letter writer was signing himself simply as Jack. Thus, one theory is that this is how Jack the Ripper acquired his name. Could this be the case of a serial killer trying to gain notoriety from adopting the name of Spring-Heeled Jack? Both seem to target women. Could it be that Spring-Heeled Jack had progressed from pranks to sexual assault and finally to murder? Jack the Ripper's murders ended in the fall of 1888, while the last known sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack was in 1904, where he was last seen bounding across rooftops and into obscurity. The overlap of these two fiends may be pure coincidence, maybe not, but we'll never know for sure. So if you like this content and would like to hear more, then please remember to hit like and subscribe.